Hello and welcome to our next session today, focusing on standardisation and adapting digital standardisation rules to match a post-crisis world. Well, this next discussion will review the current trends in absorbing digital technologies worldwide and evaluate the opportunities to create transparency and standards through international institutions. The recent pandemic has shown that policymakers need to act quickly to strategically formulate a relevant set of standards as there is a greater shift towards digital adoption. Well, to find out more, it's a great privilege to have here with us today Dr. Bernardo at Calzadilla-Sarmiento, who's the Managing Director of the Directorate of Digitalization, Technology and Agri-Business at UNIDO. Dr. Calzadilla has been Director for the Technical Assistance and Training at the International Organization for Standardization. As Director of the Department of Trade, Investment and Innovation, he's been leading the work on quality and standards for trade, investment for sustainable development and innovation in the context of the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Dr. Calzadilla has more than 25 years of international experience in global development across Africa, Asia and Latin America. Elena Santiago is our next panelist, who's the Director General of the European Committee for Standardisation and European Committee for Electrotechnical Standardisation. Mrs. Santiago is responsible for the direction of the Management Centre, implementing the digital transformation and innovation strategies and providing executive support to the activities of the General Assemblies and Admin Boards, the Presidential Committee, as well as their advisory committees. She manages institutional relations with the European Union institutions and the EFTA, and is responsible for relations with the European sister organisation, ETSI. Mrs. Santiago is also a member of the European Union Agency for Cybersecurity and Vice President of the Women for Cyber Foundation. Professor Joao Faraz is our final panelist and is the Associate Professor at the Economic Institute at the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. He was i.e. a UFRJ Dean between 1998 and 2003 and Visiting Professor at the University of Tsukuba, Japan. In public offices between 2007 and 2016, he was Vice President and Executive Director of the Brazilian Development Bank in Rio de Janeiro. His research interests include development and disruptive technologies and finance innovations for sustainability. He's also co-author of Snapshots of a State of Flux, how Brazilian industrial firms differ in the adoption of digital technologies and policy implications, for the 2019 Journal of Economic Policy Reform. A very warm welcome to you all. As I said, it really is a great privilege to have you all here with us today to discuss digital standardization in a post-COVID world. So what does the international standardization landscape look like? Dr. Bernardo, I'd actually like to start off with you so that you can actually set the scene for us. What does the international standardization landscape look like in your mind? And what sort of role is standardization playing in the fight against the impact of COVID-19 at present?
Thank you very much. And indeed, I believe that the pandemic and nowadays it's impossible not to start something referring to the situation in which we are, has shown the relevance bigger than ever of standards and quality infrastructure. Let's look at what happened. COVID-19 started with a health crisis, but immediately disrupted the global economic activity. Starting from China, there were no deliverables, no supply. All the value chains started to be in a crisis and were interrupted. And this interruption has robbed millions of people from livelihood. Especially women were hit because they are the ones that are employed at low level with low salaries, insecure posts relative to men. There was also an immediate migration to digital space. But here again, we see an increase of inequalities because only some of the population could migrate to digital space and others were left behind, and we need to make sure that this does not happen. In this context, industrialization has been playing a vital role and will continue to play a vital role, and standardization has been extremely important. We saw it in relation to the production of essential medical goods, of PPE, the personal protective equipment, testing kits inter alia. The pandemic has highlighted the standards for trade and quality infrastructure are absolutely important in relation to the standards, to requirements, to certification, to laboratory services that need to have a basic quality mutual understanding. Policies need to be absolutely clear and define the roles and responsibilities, particularly in a so quickly and need to standardize. Standards also help to mitigate the negative aspects in several ways. First of all, you have product standards that really define the requirements. We have harmonization and acceptance of equivalence, but also the COVID pandemic has aroused the necessity of new standards and quality infrastructure. And as we go, we can talk about how the pandemic has also influenced digitalization, and then we can see what standards can be needed for standardization. But let me refer to what we are also doing at the level of UNIDO. We have been providing normative support, practical guidance to member states. We have been engaging with the global partners, such as ISO, the IEC, the ITU, ILAC, IEF, and we have been working together with INET-UI, the International Network for Quality Infrastructure, to show the relevance. We made an analysis of how this fits in relation to the UN development framework, the SDGs, and we have seen also that it is necessary to guide the enterprises back to business continuity. Business continuity because after the interruption, it's not automatic that you can just open the door and resume activity. You need to have a number of support, guidance, you need security, you need safety. The resuming of the value chain is something that is extremely important to be supported. And again, there, standards do not play only a role in business continuity, but in resilience, and also as a tool to prepare for the future in having the opportunities that are arising also by this migration into the digital world, but also to mitigate the negative aspects that are coming with the pandemic. Thank you.
Just before we can move on to Elena, do you feel that the sort of pre-COVID world and the post-COVID world are actually quite similar when it comes to standardization, and COVID has in fact just sort of accelerated the process? Or is there a whole sort of new influx of standardization procedures that now need to be implemented? Is it giving you a fresh look on things as well?
Well, thank you very much. I must say that it's a pleasure to be here today. I think that what COVID-19 has done is two things. One, to emphasize the role of standards that has been very invisible. So those that are involved in the technical work are very familiar with specifications, with the standardization at international level, at European level, at national level. However, this desperate need to have harmonized documents and to make a continuity with the supply chain has been extremely relevant to get standardization high in the agenda from a strategic perspective. It has indeed had an impact on the way we do things, because, and it has been a very positive impact in spite of the pandemic, because we were under so much pressure to deliver that we put a lot of efforts and energies on what was really a priority. And I would like to give an example that has been extremely interesting for the European community, which the European Commission turned to us, turned to the European Standards Committee, and CENELEC, and they realized that there were some inequalities in the development of artisanal masks. So another value that I didn't mention before is that standardization has been humanized, because you could have a grandmother talking about how to make a standard for a mask in order to protect herself from the virus. And we have a lot of anecdotes in this respect. But actually, the Commission turned to us, of course, in addition to all the standards that we had already available for personal protective equipment, respiratory equipment, for sanitizers in general, which were already there and that were extremely relevant already for industry, but not so much needed for professionals and citizens. They also asked us to develop very fast a European deliverable for artisanal masks so that everybody could do their own mask at home. And for that, we had requirements that had been developed by different countries in Europe, but not all of them were the same. So we put together all the experts and with a lot of effort in 2 weeks, we put together a common specification for 34 countries, 600 million consumers, because this is the outreach of the CENELEC community. And this has been a change in the standardization community. We always speak about timely delivery, and it will have an impact for sure in the future of the way we work. Digitization is extremely important, of course, in this case, digital transformation, but I wouldn't say that it has already changed the procedure, but it has given us a lot of food for thought. So if we manage to address this need so fast, what we need to do to make sure that we address the market timely. And that, and for that, no matter if you come from Europe or you come from anywhere else in the world, international standards are extremely important. I would like also to emphasize that we are not political bodies, the European standards organizations, but what we try to get is the best knowledge that is available in the market, in the world, and to put that together in a compromise, in a consensus that then can be used by all those that have the need. And to complement this introduction, the experience for us also has been very rewarding in spite of 10, 12, 14 hours working days, because too many countries, too many member states in Europe also trying to address a very, very significant crisis, a lot of impact on citizens and on professionals. The health sector has suffered a lot all over the world. And we have also managed to have a very good coordination with the international standards organizations and within the experts at European level to promote alternative production lines. So standards have been also extremely useful in this period to support innovation, because with our standards, companies that were not producing respiratory equipment or masks or any kind of personal protective equipment were transforming their production lines very fast in order to accommodate supply chains. And also, we managed to get experts from different parts of the world. In particular, we had a lot of exchange with China to make sure that we had technical requirements equivalent in the Chinese standards and the European standards, so that the European countries could import products in Europe that had an equivalent level of safety and security for the consumers and the citizens. So a full list of advantages in spite of this terrible situation. But we really see this as a great opportunity to make a standardization visible. So we are not in the shadows anymore, and that put a lot of pressure also on the standardization community.
Thank you very much. Professor Joao, what role do you feel is standardization playing in the fight against the impact of COVID-19? And also, it'll be interesting to know what your thoughts are on this huge variety of digital technological solutions. Can they be adequately categorized and standardized as well? What are your thoughts on that?
Hello, and it's good to be here with such a knowledgeable panel. My take, Laura, is that at the same time that the normal citizen is getting a bit more acquainted with issues associated with standards, as you know, the type of masks, the N95, or that, you know, when there is a discussion on the production of respiratory equipment and the need to reach high levels of scale in order to feed the pressing demand, or the vaccine, the testing of vaccines that had to follow certain standards, not the standards, the technical standards, but had to follow certain rules. So the citizens are getting a bit acquainted with the notion that some type of codification and agreement on information is necessary. And this is a huge opportunity, as Bernardo and Elena just told us. But on the other hand, and the demand for that is very high. We just finished a research here in Brazil, interviewing 1,000 firms, executive of firms, asking them, what are their take in digitalization at the manufacturing level, not the administrative only, but at the factory level. And above 80% of them said that their strategy, or even their current adoption and future adoption, depends very much, for more than 80% of the respondents, the issue of rules, of protocols ensuring security and safety of transactions is absolutely vital. So, not only the normal citizens, but also the business sector is feeling that some level of standardization, if you wish, is necessary. For me, standardization is a sort of because it codifies information, is a sort of a lingua franca of technology. Yeah, it's just like the English is becoming the lingua franca of business. This lingua franca of technology, though, has to face huge challenges. And I think that what you mentioned, Laura, is just a sign of that. As we are facing zillions of information, this fourth industrial revolution, maybe we could call it information revolution. There are many researchers that call it the information society revolution. Now, if it is information is quantity and variety. Yeah, there are these two elements. And the codification of quantity and the codification of variety is not a simple problem, issue to face. Yeah. So, if you take, for example, the issue of the technical progress is unstoppable. And variety is very strong. Now, standardization sort of tries to count down, to organize, to register certain procedures. Now, the moment that a specific procedure is codified, maybe it became obsolete. So, we have to, standardization is sort of has to aim at zillions of moving targets, changing targets, which makes life of professionals like Elena, her life must not be simple, I would say. Yeah? But we can follow this. We can go further in detail.
Okay. It's incredibly fast-paced, though. That's one, as you said, one of the challenges. And as you said, yes, there's so much information, of course. Were you, in fact, surprised by those results, though, that 80% of your 1,000 respondents, that's what they wanted? Maybe that's not actually so surprising.
Well, it is surprising in the sense that the set of questions, so the block of questions that we are asking was in relation to the relevance of digital infrastructures for the success of their digitalization strategies. And the other issues were related to the speed of broadband and the price and the quality of access. And surprisingly, and usually when you ask people, not only businessmen, you ask people about prices, they will put this, I would like to have a low cost service, of course. This comes usually in the top of the mind of people. And it called our attention that out of these 1,000 executives, they put security, the cyber security, and this is an issue that Elena, from her curriculum, we know that she's engaged in, that security and safety and the reliance of the infrastructure that they are using as the top priority. So it's not a matter of price and quality, it's more that if you have something working, please keep it working. And on this, standards are essential.
I think it's very important to understand that this, for all of us, this is complete cultural transformation, also for standardization. And I find it fascinating, but at the same time, as you mentioned, extremely challenging. But the standards of the future, and you said you have a huge, a very difficult challenge. The standards of the future are not at all like the ones that we are considering today. Now we are considering about granularity in the, is information, but it's granularity in the data that are included in the standards, the possibility to fetch that information in all kind of use cases. So this is a cultural change. And that cultural change, which is it's very, very relevant, has to go not only through all the experts that are already familiar and know about the standardization, but it needs to give us the opportunity to be more attractive for innovators, for researchers, for young generation, for digital natives, so that we can really get the world of standards up to speed with the economic developments. And that is a challenge. I mean, I suppose we will elaborate, but we have got beautiful process and projects in the European standardization community, always coordinating with the international ones, because we do believe in economy of scale and the importance to have international first, if that is possible, because the objective is indeed to help experts to do the best of the time they devote to codify, as you were mentioning, Joao, not to be deciding in which standard body they have to go in order to get a good standard that can be made available. But just to say that digital transformation, the evolution to a digital solutions from the standardization community is indeed a big challenge, but we are passionate about delivering a good reply to the economy and the market.
I'm sure. We're actually going to go through to challenges a little later. Sorry, Dr. Bernardo, did you want to add something to that as well?
Yes, I very much appreciated, Elena, your example of the 2 weeks intensive work that you had to produce a standard. We have a similar experience in a much more underdeveloped region. In the ECOWAS region, in West Africa, we have been supporting the harmonization and the creation of a body that does standards for over 15 years. And what we witness is that in this momentum, and I like the concept of intensity that you use, what happened is that in 2 months, not in 2 weeks, but this is a body that is starting 14 countries, they came together. And they produced also similar PPE-related standards. But what I wanted to mention eventually, as we're trying to bring the conversation into innovation, what struck me is the innovative way this has happened, because they could do it in a virtual manner, through precisely virtual tools, which never happened before. In that region, there was always the concept and the notion, no, there needs to be a physical meeting, and there is no other way of doing things because the internet connection is not good, etc. But the necessity made it happen. And this is important in standardization. It's not about just coming with the end result, with the requirements, with the guidance that will come out at the end of the day. The process is very important. So in this pandemic, we have also seen there is a strong process innovation of how this consensus building is happening.
Well, as you said, yeah, a lot of you have mentioned innovation, and in times of crisis, a lot of the time, there is a lot of innovation and creativity, isn't there? Everyone, workforces have to be creative going forward. So, Dr. Bernardo, do you think that internationally recognize standards can help unleash innovation as well, and also help the manufacturing sector to really reap the full potential of 4IR then?
Well, this discussion about the relation between standardization and innovation is a very passionate one, because we have still the notion, many people saying that standardization is hindering innovation, while this dichotomy of innovation and standardization is completely wrong, in my opinion, because standardization helps precisely not only the standardization through the process of bringing together many actors, but brings to, once you have a standard, helps innovation to move forward. And we have seen it during this case. But let's look back. Innovation, standardization was at the beginning more related to product specifications that were very concrete, let's say, even defining the materials that would be used. And then this migrated into a situation where the specification was about the result that was coming. But for many decades, I would say, it was about product specification, and standardization came from the technical area. But suddenly there was a break, and I always say it moved into the system thinking momentum. And when we started to have system thinking, it was about the standardization of production process. It was about the way you can also manage companies. And we had this flagship, I call it the flagship standard that was in the 80s, the ISO 9000, that created this notion that of quality. I mean, we associate standard finally with quality, because they can warranty the quality and they boost the productivity. But back to innovation, in the era of the fourth industrial revolution, the standards have a very important role to play. They are drivers of innovation, the groundbreaking innovation, even the internet, I mean, Windows and all these are standard processes that have helped to bring all the standardization out. But in the smart manufacturing, going back to our very topic in industry, we're talking about industry of things, big data, artificial intelligence, but the Internet of Things is a process that needs interoperability, needs accelerated standard digitalization. To accelerate digitalization, you need other standards. We're talking about 5G. It's still a very controversial debate, but we need more standards to move forward the digitalization. And we need to think that it is about system integration. It is about interoperability, because we cannot think that the device will talk to each other if they don't have the same language. And Professor Joao mentioned to refer to this issue, that it is a language, but that helps us to bring everybody together. But also, what I mentioned before, it is very important to avoid the negative implications. Digitalization, etc., is bringing a number of momentum where we have to be very careful. There are the whole business of cybersecurity, but also it can help us to reduce climate change issues, reduce energy consumption. In the order of smart cities, we can see how IoT and the artificial intelligence can have to reduce the carbon footprint in transport. So we think that standards, it is very important to build the cyber resilience that we need. So we are talking about after the pandemic, and we are talking about resilience, about business continuity. We will need to very much put at the center cyber resilience, because if we move into a digital world, we will need to be minimizing the risk, and standards are called to play a very important role there. Also, to finalize my thought, is standards are very important also to help small companies to innovate. We have been very much engaged in a standard process of innovation management system, and the value we see there is that, again, innovation was very much related to research and to big companies, while we see that innovation is necessary to adapt to the demand, to adapt to the market. And this standard, which we are helping to provide guidance to SMEs, is such a tool that will help precisely companies and the industrial sector to recover better and to recover in a sustainable manner. Thank you.
Professor Joao.
Yeah, it caught my attention what Bernardo was saying about standardization should go beyond the common wisdom that it's applied to products only. And he mentioned the standards associated with quality, the famous ISO 9000. What caught my attention is that first, this so-called the fourth industrial revolution, it goes beyond the digital. Although the digital provides almost the technical base, we are facing huge challenges and changes in the biotech, the new generation biotech, and you see the vaccines, some of these vaccines coming up, or the energy, the energy saving, the batteries, the nanotech. So we are sort of in the face of issues and technology that goes beyond the ICT, the information and communication technology in itself. Now, given this, that, and of course that all of this depends on masses of information, but given this, and this is probably something that probably certainly Elena has given some thought about this, and I would like, if I can ask her, is whether you mentioned that standards in the future are going to be different. And my question is whether what Bernardo was suggesting doesn't make sense, in the sense that standardization of the future are going to be much more on norms of behavior following certain essentials, rather than on top of the technical specifications. So we have the 9000, and we have the one for environment, the 14, and we have the governance, which is the 26,000. So these are these different standards that they go on this direction of setting up rules for behavior. And given that all of these crazy things that are going on in the world today, I wonder if we shouldn't have a norm for ethics. Yeah, I don't know. It's just a provocation here because, but.
For ethics. Okay, for direct reference, Laura, thank you, Joao, for the question. Thank you, Professor. I think it's extremely important. And it's a very good point, because maybe I should have made the precision. In this digital transformation project or plan that we are developing at European level, we have realized that we need to develop two different kinds of standards. Standards that are interpretable by machines, and standards that are going to be interpreted by persons. And what we have realized is that it's not the same. We cannot use exactly the same process to develop a standard that is going to be machine interpretable than to develop a standard that can be very well related to behavior and ethics. And there are already some initiatives, for instance, on artificial intelligence and ethics on artificial intelligence. That is extremely important in the context of European regulation, the General Data Protection Regulation. So these are two different dimensions that we are facing in parallel. So today we write the standards that are interpreted by persons, and we can address behavioral standards, and we have several, and we will continue working in that direction. But if we talk about Industry 4.0, and the way we see that is, this is blending the digital world with the physical world. So it's machines and humans interacting, and standards addressing both needs, sometimes blending also those needs into the same world. And this can sound a little bit futuristic. Sometimes when I look into the work that the technical committees are doing, I'm thinking about Blade Runner. I mean, we are talking about hydrogen cars, a technology that can make cars fly. We are talking about Hyperloop, so a new transport methodology that can go to the speed that we would have never imagined. And this is all happening in the standardization community. And there I would like to elaborate on Bernardo. Innovation, and this is also again a very, very interesting impact of the digitization, servitization of the economy in standardization. What is very important, and we are trying to make a lot of efforts on that, is to get together, closer, integrating innovation, research, and standardization. It is a fact that the standardization disseminates very fast innovation and research results. So far, or the experience that we had at European level is that we had researchers that were working on a specific innovation or research, and we waited until they had concluded their innovation to start standardizing and to make sure that that innovation could actually happen in the market. This is completely obsolete. We now need to start standardizing at the same time as the innovation and the research project starts. And all of this is actually being addressed thanks to the fourth industrial revolution, all the technologies that are supporting the industrial revolution, and what we call the twin transitions, because for us, digital and green are, for us, I mean, in Europe, we are having a lot of emphasis, and I think this is something that can be extended to more or less the world, the importance, and this is also a subject that has been very much highlighted through the pandemic, environmental protection. How happy we all have been with blue, clean skies, and being nature, behaving as nature, and the importance of protecting the environment to make sure that our products, services, the economy follow not only the digital path, but also the green path in the industrial revolution. We can elaborate more, but innovation is essential in order to make sure that this twin transition happen. And when we speak about communication, symbiotic ecosystems, smart grids, smart factories, smart meters, all of that connect digital and energy consumption.
That was actually my next question, actually, because I mean, there are, there's a multitude of international bodies relevant to 4IR standardization. So the big question is, how can they work together to achieve international standardization of 4IR technologies? Dr. Bernardo, what are your thoughts when it comes to working together? And also, what is UNIDO, is there anything in place to sort of re-energize our digital future and to achieve international standardization? Is there anything you can tell us?
Thank you very much. Building on the discussion, how it was going on, and looking at the relevance of standards and bringing this discussion into digital transformation, into going back to the big picture, to the SDGs, etc. I think what is important to recall is that standards are one set of tools that can help us to bring the agenda forward. And certainly we have the tendency, despite that we have the privilege to have Elena and CENELEC here today, in general, the discussion, when we talk about standards, we're talking about international standards. This is the tendency, but there are many other type of standards. For behavior, we have the sustainability standards. We have the Global Compact as a big example that was the main tool to try to have the big companies, the multinationals, behaving in relation to agreed principles. And then we also in the discussion talked about GRSP, which is how to enter the privacy and how to make sure. And I like the discussion on ethics because GRSP is precisely where it's bringing us to this borderline discussion where many companies say it's too restrictive, many consumers says, no, this is the way to go. But ethics is probably one of the areas that will maybe be solved with standards, but there are many other tools at the level of standards, of policy. I completely subscribe on the need to, first of all, define guiding principles. We had a discussion recently with UNESCO and other UN agencies, and this is trying to go to your question on how you are collaborating, and we need really to start from the beginning. We don't have even a very clear definition of what is artificial intelligence, so that once we started this process, and UNESCO is driving this in order to go into this direction, how can we do to bring ethics into the evolution? But back to what we are doing, we are certainly working very closely with a more narrow international system, which is with ISO, with the ITU, with the IEC, and we have been setting a number of guidance and disseminating standards. I mean, just ISO 45000 on occupational health and safety, very relevant for this present situation. We work with them and we disseminate. We have been also, and we started the discussion on digital assessment and digital audits with the accreditation body. So we have a group that I mentioned before, the International Network on Quality Infrastructure, that helps us to bring forward many of these issues. Recently, we are finalizing a document called Laboratory Policy, and precisely in relation to guidance and developing a laboratory policy for countries, it has shown that there is a need to have frameworks, policy frameworks, before we start moving into the behavior of the laboratories, or how they develop their competence. So that's another area where we have been collaborating with many agencies, with the World Bank, with UNIDO. So we have a number of areas that I wouldn't like to expand too much, but to reiterate the need precisely to continue this work. But moreover, and this is why I engage so proudly and positively with GMIS, I think that it is important that we have this exchange of also with the private sector. Partnership with business is very important. We will not be able to move forward into a multilateral way of action to collective decision making if we do not engage much more with the private sector. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. Professor Joao, what do you feel is the best way forward when it comes to working together?
I think that this is such a huge challenge because not only of the issues that we've been talking about, you know, the quantity and the variety of information and the pace of technical progress, that you know, things are changing fast, and this makes life easier in order to organize. But there is the other side, there is all this demand for a more rule-based, well-known, established agreements on how to move forward. I think that there is these technical difficulties, but also there is another dimension that I think that is absolutely relevant, that makes life difficult, which are the contrasting interests. We cannot just, you know, play down that very strong and different interests play a very a role in the discussion of standards. It's not only the basic of proprietary versus open issues. You know, this is just a simple example of the different interests that there are around this subject. But there are the interests along value chains between consumers and producers, between those, you know, more pro-environment, against pro-environment. So we have to take into account that there is a political economy dimension on standardization, and there are different interests. And the only way to move forward is something that came to my mind when Bernardo was mentioning the actions that they are doing in relation to small and medium, small firms. Capacity, capabilities, you know, people that is engaged into the standardization arena must have the capacity to discuss and to define strategies and to implement standards. You know, the capability dimension to understand and internalize and then move forward, either as a business or as a consumer, to demand things, or at the policy level, to what extent within public institutions this notion that has been brought by Bernardo and Elena is embedded. Yeah. So that is, I think that beyond the directions, and I think that there are few essentials that we should put emphasis in. There is a sort of a crusade for standardization that is necessary in order for this lingua franca be accepted and people be willing to engage in a discussion on how to organize things. And in this sense, as Bernardo was mentioning, organizations just like GMIS in producing this, on raising the issue and producing the debate is very welcome. And it's just a sort of a tide. We have to keep on pushing this tide of convincing the relevance for, but be aware that there are different interests associated with.
Sadly, we are running out of time, but just before we wrap up, Elena, what in your mind is the best way forward when it comes to working together to achieve international standardization of 4IR?
The key word is cooperation and collaboration. We in CENELEC, we follow a model that is called the national delegation principle. Of course, I say, for me, this is a great model because what happens is that at national level, the standards bodies engage with all the parties, consumers, SMEs, regulatory agencies, companies, and spread the understanding of standardization. Then that is elevated at European level, and there is a lot of common work at international level. This is a model. But this is not the only model. We should not say this is the only way of working. We need to understand that standards reflect know-how. Standards reflect the state of the art. And we need to learn to work better, to get the best of every organization that is actually working on standards and to find mechanisms to map how we can serve better the interest of the society and the economy with standardization. Now, again, in Europe, there is a very, very important priority, international first. Whatever can happen in an international standardization bodies, let's try to get all the relevant parties involved at international level so that we can get a solution at international level that can then be deployed at, in our case, regional or national level. And then total harmonization, because I think that to have a common language, as Professor Joao was saying, and then many dialects that would not help us to understand each other is not going to help. But the key work here is establish a strategic alliance, a good collaboration, trying to keep well the path and the information from other bodies, understanding who has got the best knowledge and experience in order to be able to share that knowledge and experience with the other parts of the economy. I don't want to be naive. Of course, standardization is a game of a lot of commercial interest. However, standardization has got a beautiful collateral effect, and that is an impact on safety, an impact on security, an impact on environmental protection. And at the end of the day, I think that European standards organizations, national standards organizations, SDOs that are developing standards, international standards organizations should have an objective. Yes, competitiveness, but yes, also let's get the best compromise that we can get in order to serve the market, in order to have safe products in the market, in order to have, not in every part of the world, I always say, I don't want to have a different level of safety or security in Europe than in other part of the world. That's why knowledge share is very important. That's why academic cooperation between the different parts of the world is very important. And that's why cooperation between standards organizations, whatever nature and whatever they deliver, is essential. Now, the challenge is huge because the map is being wider and wider and wider, and every time there is a mushrooming or new standards bodies that come up with new inventions in the standardization community. But we have that duty. We need to make sure that we bring that knowledge, we bring that expertise, and that we use the results in the best possible way. I know this sounds a little bit abstract, Laura, and however, I do believe in cooperation and collaboration in order to make sure that we give the best from the standardization bodies.
Some excellent insights there. Thank you so much. Very sadly, we've run out of time. However, just before we go, it would be great to get some of the key highlights that you'd like our audience to go away with, even just a couple of sentences. What are the key messages that you'd like our audience to go away with when it comes to digital standardization rules in enabling the post-COVID recovery as well?
Well, I would like to build on what Elena mentioned. I think in this process, standards were brought out of the shadow. And there is a lot to learn out of standardization. I think that what I most would like to say, and we were talking about the need to build more on collaboration, how to work together, and we can learn also a lot from standardization. I always say standardization is a consensus building machinery, but this consensus building machinery has a lot of rules, has a lot of experience, has a lot of processes, and when we are in other types of setups, we can learn a lot of this organized way of having structured dialogues that build consensus, that brings us to the next level. And the next level, without doubt, will be the fourth industrial revolution, will be this new normal where we will live in a hybrid world that will have at the core the digital dimension. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Elena, your final thoughts, please.
Yes, Laura, I'm going to use a slogan that CENELEC have been using for the last 6 months, and that is still very alive. Standards build trust. This has been our slogan when the new commission, the European Commission came, because we believe it's very important to understand that standards are a tool that generate trust in the market, generate trust from consumers in the technology, generate trust between companies using standards, generate trust in regulators when they have to assess and to survey the market and the products that are placed on their market. So my main message here is standards build trust, and in particular regarding the digital economy, the standards generate trust in new technologies.
Professor Joao, your final thoughts and key messages, please.
Standards is the lingua franca of technology. So in despite of all these millions of pieces of information, standards absolutely necessary. We will have to aim at moving targets, and the focus on essentials is necessary. For that, not only the standard organizations and the professionals associated with this, but businessmen, politicians, policymakers, and citizens will have to consider what choices they will make. And for that, wisdom is one quality that is very necessary. Now, paraphrasing T.S. Eliot, there is a challenge there. There is a verse that he said, where is the wisdom? We lost in knowledge. And where is the knowledge? We lost in information. So wisdom, and wisdom is necessary.
Fantastic. It really has been an absolute pleasure speaking with all of you today. A truly excellent session there. And thank you so much to each of you for sharing your thoughts and knowledge so openly with us here today. Thank you so much. And as always, if anyone would like to continue the conversation, please do head on over to our social media where you can find us under @GMI Summit. And please do feel free to email us. And also, please do stay with us for the next session. Thank you very much.